Welcome to Scaling AI and IT Services Delivery. And I'm Wes Moss. I'm Vice President of the CX Center's Delivery for the Americas. So I specifically am responsible for professional services, managed services, and solution validation services delivery to our customers. I report into Buffy Ransom, who's the GM and Senior Vice President of the CX Centers globally. So she is not only responsible for professional services, but also support as well. And we have our esteemed colleague, Bhaskar Jayakrishnan. He leads global CX engineering, and he's the organization behind Cisco IQ, the new delivery vehicle for support and professional services. And we also have David Jansen. He's a distinguished solution engineer focused on technology strategy for our global solutions engineering organization across all segments, verticals, and technologies, with a series of innovation initiatives. So welcome to you all. So let's start with a level set. So we've spent the last few years incorporating AI into IT services delivery. Can you talk about why IT organizations have adopted and are now scaling AI in their organization? And Bhaskar, I'll start with you.
Wes, that's a good question. And it all comes down to how we want to achieve service excellence. We are seeing a fundamental shift in the industry. If you think about the historical context, when cases came in, the quality of service you got depended on where it landed. If the ticket was handled by a veteran, the quality of service you got was pretty high. If it was a junior level engineer that was just getting started, there was a learning curve. But with AI, we get to fundamentally change that. We get to apply the technology to give a consistent experience across all our customers. Now, that consistency comes in many different ways. When a ticket comes in, even that simple process of matching a ticket with an engineer is extremely context heavy. It depends on what is the issue description which was written up in the ticket. It has to match with the right level of the right engineer that has the context and the skill. And in all of this, you also have to pull in a whole bunch of historical context. Thanks to AI, we are able to connect across all of these. And the first contact resolution rates we are seeing when you apply the technology has gone way up. And this is how we are going to set a new standard for service excellence leveraging AI.
I was a TAC engineer 26 years ago. That's how I started. I wish we had those capabilities back then. That would be nirvana for sure. Talk about the data-driven insights you gain also.
So when we think about data, again, when a ticket comes in, that itself is data because it's an issue description. When it gets mapped to an engineer, that engineer needs to draw upon historical context of potentially the device for which a ticket was raised, or the organization, the environment. And not just that, for us to turn around and resolve it, there is a lot of why behind it. And for that, you need to process a good amount of documentation so that you can reason through how this ticket can be resolved. But apart from that, you might also have historical cases themselves, and that information needs to be fed back in. So when it comes to AI, it's all about the data. The better the context, the better the output. So when I think about AI, I think people focus a lot on models, but data is everything. And the other element of it is once you've resolved a case, you turn it around into a root cause, an analysis, and all of that feeds back into improving the system either directly when the next ticket comes in or through a system like Cisco IQ and proactive resilience, where you can take it and expose it directly to the customer, avoiding the problem to start with.
Yeah, makes sense. Buffy, tell us how we've scaled AI in support.
Yeah, honestly, Bhaskar brings up such great points because what we've done is taken the consistency and quality goal and aim across the organization for so many years to free up the capacity and resources to have those complex issues be supported by our most senior engineers. And that journey has been really good. We applied it with ML, then we had AI, then we had Gen AI, and now we're playing around and in a very thoughtful way looking at agentic AI as well. Now, we focused on a couple of different areas initially. So we focused on removing tasks and driving efficiency within tasks. Then we looked at next best suggestions, really evolving the thinking around how we're going to apply AI across the organization as well. And now we're in the agentic realm to where we're looking at full end-to-end responsibility through our AI assistant as well. And I think, if I think about the customers and what they continue to tell us, they continue to tell us that they want proactive solutions. They don't want to play in the reactive space anymore. They want to move up that value chain, having proactive, resilient, predictive solutions as well.
There were a lot of good points in what you said, not just about applying the technology, but you made a point about technology itself moving so fast that the possibilities of what we can do itself keeps changing. And therefore, you have to go back, revisit your workflows to see how we can leverage all of this better.
That's exactly right. And the payload that comes from Cisco, just in general, from a support engineer, it's immense. And so we have to act quickly, free up resources, and leverage, the assets that we have across the teams internally as well.
Buffy, can you talk about the empirical results you've gained as well?
Well, we've actually seen some really, really good momentum. So on an annual basis, we get about 1.4 million SRs a year. 97% of those are actually touched by AI in some shape or form, task-based, next best suggestions when I talked about before, summarization 24/7. And now, full end-to-end as well. A couple of key metrics, and Bhaskar, you talked on one of them, which was making sure that we've matched the right engineer to the right case. 70 to almost, actually, it's around 80% of the time now, we're getting it mapped to one engineer. That full, complete ownership actually happens right away, and that's usually leveraging our own internal AI solutions as well. From a support perspective, we're seeing resolution times increase. We're now at 42% within 1 day. And a couple of specific scenarios to where we have full end-to-end agentic use, about 60% of the time, it is a no-touch experience for our customers. Really, really fast. This is specifically around our RMAs. And we're starting to build out the business cases for additional Q&A and actually some lower severity issues as well.
Amazing stats. Thank you, Buffy. David, let me come to you. You advise customers on reinventing their IT shops. What are you seeing in your space around AI?
Yes, thank you, Wes. So I have the distinct honor and privilege to work with customers and partners each and every day. What I would say is it's a journey, much like a lot of the things that we do. So if you look at the evolution of the industry, we started with a CLI, then we went to UIs, then software-defined networking came. Now we have predictive analytics, and now we have chatbots, agents, and now this whole thing called agentic. I would say across the board, there's a certain set of customers that have development staffs on staff to where they have like CI/CD pipelines, and they're building off of that. However, there's also the other side of the house from customers that are still doing command line interface. They're doing spreadsheets to manage their infrastructure. Really, that's a single source of truth. However, they're moving to like CMDB. So I would say that customers are on various different parts of the journey. With that, they're moving to an AI ops assurance before they're getting to agentic. I consider this all to be iterative process, and they sort of build upon each other. Bhaskar, to your point, this thing's moving fast. We have to keep retooling things. And the customers ask, well, what tools can we get rid of? So with the AI ops and predictive maintenance, we're not to the point to where we're doing closed loop automation. There's still a human element into the actual workflows. However, they're deriving value to pinpoint where the problems are at with assurance and AI operations, driving to an agentic framework. And there's a whole bunch of elements that come into the agentic framework. One is, how do I become more proficient in the natural language interfaces and prompt engineering to closed loop automation and elements like that?
Yeah, when we think of like auto remediation, like how far away are we from that in reality?
So I try to apply things in reality. I would say closed loop automation is probably 2 to 3 years out. But however, we're starting the planning processes. So data sovereignty comes into this and all these other elements to prepare from a governance and safety perspective as well.
Very cool. Thank you. So I'm going to start with you, Bhaskar. How do we secure an agent?
Wes, actually, I'll make that question broader. How do you secure an agent, and how do you secure the rest of the world from the agent?
Yep.
So there's a lot happening here. I mean, technology is fast moving, but along with it, there are challenges. you want to take advantage of what the technology has to offer, but it needs to come with the right guardrails. So when we think about an AI agent, we think of it not as a piece of software, but a persona. It's an operational entity that has an identity. So for you to have the guardrails in place, you have to think of it as a multi-layered approach. First is identity. What identifies an agent? What can it access? And if you think of, you would have heard this term about access control, which is what we've traditionally been using. But now with agents, we are also talking about action control. That particular identity, what actions can it take in which systems? And in all of this, as you give access to systems, how do you ensure that you give the most minimal access, nothing more than what is absolutely necessary? The second part of it is data protection. Given that these agents have access to a lot of data from different systems and they are putting a response together, you want to make sure that the data is cared for, it's secure, it's encrypted. There are many different layers there as well. Now, the other element of it is guardrails. You would have probably seen these news articles about how people go to AI assistant and ask it to write a program, and it writes a program, right? If you don't have those guardrails, the agents can go off the rails where they can either answer questions which ideally they are not supposed to, or you can trick them into buying a plane ticket for $1, for example, right? So there are a lot of things to consider. So it's a multi-layered approach covering multiple dimensions of everything the agent touches. And similarly, as I said, you also have to protect the world from the agent. So you also want to make sure that the responses and everything else is constantly evaluated. That's why an evaluation framework which evaluates the responses, evaluates the reasoning, evaluates every element of what the agentic elements are doing is absolutely foundational.
Yeah, very insightful.
And Bhaskar, I'll touch on that just a minute, and you know we're going to talk about this in a second. But that rule-based engine that defines those guardrails, so critical, and we have learned a lot over the past, quarter or two as we've delved into this space as well.
You touched upon yet another thing. I mean, it's a learning experience for all of us.
Yeah.
The technology is moving fast, and along with it, there is an element of upskilling ourselves, our teams, that goes along with it.
Yeah.
Definitely. David, what are you seeing in your space?
Thank you, Wes. So customers have been on zero trust network access initiatives for many years. And Bhaskar, I think that aligns to some of the principles like least privilege, whitelist security policies. We've had the notion of users, devices, and things being everywhere and anywhere. Applications and data are everywhere and anywhere. And now we have this notion of agents being, whether they're autonomous or part of a human identity. We need to classify and put guardrails. We have to do one, discovery. We have to be able to detect, and we have to be able to secure. So having a framework and a methodology to do that and understand what these things are doing. So how do you differentiate how an agent is leveraging a web browser, accessing a SaaS application on behalf of myself? We've been training our staff on not to click on ransomware like emails and text messages. So Bhaskar, to your point, as far as like the prompt response, this is where runtime security comes in. We need to put guardrails around this and stop this behavior on these autonomous agents. What we've done is we've built a secure networking reference design from a sales point of view and how we show up differently to our customers. This is a set of capabilities and outcomes to where it includes users, devices, things, applications and data, agentic-driven operations for that with different personas for the customers that, like for security operations, network operations, and we're driving that to fruition to where it's driving next-gen network operations centers of the future and next-gen SOC of the future. Why do I say that? The NOC is getting network and application telemetry, and they're leveraging AI, like machine learning, like you mentioned, Buffy, to filter the noise and feed those results into the security operations center because there's anomalies and things that are AI is leveraging to correlate on what's happening between the application and network and all these runtime agents and AI events that are happening.
Wow, super interesting. Thank you, David. Buffy, how do we strike the right balance between deterministic or role-based workflows versus more flexible, non-deterministic AI approaches and ensure reliability?
Yeah, no, this is, such an interesting space, and we've learned, like I said, we've learned so much over the past year. We started out with a very deterministic, which means like it was a very specific scenario, RMA processing, a question and answer, here's a PCERT, here's the information here's a document. So it was very much a controlled environment. We were really successful in that space. I think because you're very deterministic, that rules-based engine that helps us escalate the situation to an engineer or Overwatch becomes a little bit less. But once you start to move into this non-deterministic environment, where the agent actually manages the beginning, the case assignment, the case working, asking for logs, giving a suggestion, waiting for the customer to come back, waiting for the customer to apply a patch over the weekend, actually wait until closure. That whole end-to-end process is now managed by an agent. That rule-based engine becomes really, really specific, and you have to drive consistency. And again, we've got over 1 million SRs that are going to be going through this particular process, which is across all of our technology stack, enterprise, data center, security, collab, the entire stack. And so we need to derive those question and answers into a deterministic state from that non-deterministic state. And it's a lifecycle management process that we're starting to learn that we need to apply to this entire process as well, almost like a maturity cycle as it goes through. So it's not a one-stop shop. We have to figure out how to be really specific in defining what the agents do, how do we apply it, and how do we work across the systems.
It's a fascinating subject. You gave a whole bunch of examples. Our customers still expect deterministic outcomes from us.
Yeah.
But as we leverage AI agents, which are probabilistic systems, we deal with that challenge of providing deterministic outcomes while we leverage probabilistic systems. It's a fascinating topic indeed.
It's going to be really interesting because we still have old metrics and measures to manage our business from a support perspective, closure rates, confirmation of closures as well. So, getting that verbal confirmation from the customer to say, yep, that totally worked. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your help. You now have an agent talking to the customer, and that customer just doesn't really start to respond in the same way because they don't realize that we still have a human in the loop. We still have overwatchers that are managing this entire process across the entire system. So we're getting different response weights. We're getting different comments back from customers as well. So it's, again, a huge learning curve. We're learning so much.
And Buffy, I've seen where customers sometimes don't even know they're dealing with an automated agent. And I've heard that CSAT may actually be higher when it's fully automated versus human. Is that true?
Yes. There are some cases to where, we've actually gotten a verbal thank you. Thank you so much, Sherlock. I love your name. Not realizing that they're working with a bot. I think now that we've exposed much more of our service request volume into this space, customers are starting to realize that they are working with an agentic agent, and it's our AI assistant across the board. And that behavior is really interesting, both internally and externally. There's a people component to this. We always kind of lean on talking about technology, but the people component is really, really important on managing this as well.
If the issues are getting resolved faster with a lot more consistency, with better quality.
Yeah,
exactly.
Who cares? Yeah,
exactly.
So I'm going to come to Bhaskar, then David on this one. So like I said, I've been in services organizations for 20 plus years. I've seen tons of pilots fail and not scale, essentially, and pilots in pockets that just never take off. So how do we get out of this pilot purgatory with AI and scale these to deployment broadly, Bhaskar?
Yeah. When it comes to AI agents, pilots are absolutely essential. There are so many technology stacks. You want to try them. You want to try it with different approaches. But then a lot of those pilots end up staying as pilots. Taking it to production requires a detailed enterprise architecture plan. And one of the things that I alluded earlier to was about data. Right? The first part is data. One of the things that we say is start with a data audit. map out the data, bring it all together. Every enterprise knows this. It's a universal truth. Enterprise data is messy. It's sitting in multiple different systems, and even if you can just take all of it and dump it into a common place, it's not correlated. I mean, there is some context to it. It needs to be stitched together. As companies go down the path of using AI agents, the first part is a data plan. For instance, recently, our professional services teams were working with a hospital system. They had this pilot where the results looked promising, but when they took it to production, the results weren't as good. So we worked with them and we put together a data plan where we brought together the data, stitched it together, gave it with the right context, and suddenly you could see the accuracy of the system improve way higher. Now, that takes us to the next part, right? As much as we've had focus on the models themselves, right, there's a lot going on here. When you process a request, for instance, we talk about reasoning, right? That reasoning needs to be tracked. When we give results, when we give a response, that needs to be tracked. Every agentic action is a observability event. So one of the other things is, unless you have the right observability, even when things go wrong, you don't have enough context to troubleshoot it and address it. So you need that observability in place. And the other thing I would call out is, as you go from pilot to production, it is also essential to have the right circuit breakers in place, right? So that, again, when things go right, it's all good. But when things go wrong, you need to troubleshoot them, and you need to be able to step in so that you can have more human supervision for you to address it. So once you put a plan which brings all of these together, then it becomes feasible to move from pilots to production.
Absolutely.
Well said. David, what do you see in your space?
Yeah, I agree with Bhaskar. Typically, why pilots fail is integration is treated as an afterthought. The use cases are not very well defined. Bhaskar, as you mentioned, AI is a data problem. Unified data platform across the enterprise versus siloed data sources, data structures, no context with the data. I have opportunity to meet with like a lot of chief data officers in putting methodologies in a plan together of what they're doing with data. Meaning you don't need your data in one spot per se, but you need to have like a data platform to federate the data to get the right context for the right type of task or workflow process that it's asking. So that, and then it's got to function across the different lines of businesses. So whether you're a manufacturing customer looking to do the operation side of the house, but this also ties into safety, security, supply chain. They're leveraging all these agents for like video analytics and spawning agents in real time to update inventories and supply chains for that. The API dependencies in tooling, there's new sets of protocols and things that are happening on there. So understanding what the risk profile is for those, how those tools integrate with the overall tool. And then Buffy, you mentioned deterministic and non-deterministic flows. This is where customers are still struggling to get their arms around. If you ask something the same question, you typically get different results. So this is where the customer data comes in to sort of fine tune that to get more predictable results, more deterministic flows, and then the actual tooling. The tooling becomes very important as well because these agents are talking to the language models, they're talking to the tools, they're talking to those other things. So again, understanding that whole workflow, the process. I would say this, it's okay to fail, because failing fast is how you build it back into the process to understand what skill sets the customer environment actually needs to consume and operate these new environments.
Wow, thank you. So we've heard complexity being the enemy of safety. As we add thousands of autonomous agents, how do we ensure the underlying infrastructure doesn't collapse under the weight? So I'll ask all three of y'all this. Bhaskar, I'll start with you.
And I'll start with a stat.
Yeah.
So only 5% of the organizations that were polled in a recent study said they have scaled beyond 100 agents. Why? Complexity, right? David alluded to something, right? You can ask the same question and you'll get multiple answers. So if you were to take it up a notch, an AI agent can come to a conclusion or come to a particular outcome using multiple paths. And that is complexity right there. We've all been working with software for the last 3-4 decades, which has always followed a predictable path. For the same set of inputs, it follows the same path every single time. But that changes on its head when it comes to AI agent. And that's why observability is key. Complexity grows non-linearly. And observability is that central nervous system which collects all that information so that you can make sense of what's going on.
Makes sense. Buffy?
You know, at the end of the day, with my support hat on, you can't compromise the customer experience. And I think within the observability, yes, it manages complexity. Yes, it manages hundreds of agents across the organization. But that rule-based engine, the guardrails that you decide to put in place to protect our engineers, protect the customer from having a bad experience, is really, really key, really, really important.
Awesome. David?
Yeah, thank you. So as these agents scale, typically you'll start from a centralized deployment. Now these agents become distributed. Now these agents start interacting with each other and sharing state and having tool dependencies and things like that. We've all lived through the cloud era of change and how cloud consumption changed. You had to re-architect the customer's enterprise for cloud consumption. I can go into the details. AI is going to do the exact same thing. And what do I mean by that? The agent, like I mentioned, is to talk to the language model, to talk to the toolings. The traffic flows that we're used to today are going to be inverted, because today typically everything's like download, like everybody's focused on like their download capacity. Now with these agents, in the language model being somewhere, it's not local or it doesn't have to be local, right? So now your upload speed. So you're going to have to re-architect for like an AI-ready enterprise. This may involve, I'm thinking through things like, what does an intelligent underlay and intelligent overlay mean to guarantee these types of service levels across the global customer environment? And Bhaskar, you mentioned observability. Observability is foundational because you have to be able to see what's happening. Like, what's the impact on the network? What's the security impact? What are the agents transactions that are happening across the network? So we need to have visibility, like I mentioned, the network, the application, and tie it into the security framework and actual foundation.
Well said.
Yeah, well said. Last question. So I'll ask all three of y'all this. So for an IT leader that's thinking, what's the one tangible step I could take in the next week to prepare for the agentic future? What would that be? Bhaskar,
You asked for one, I'm going to sneak in two.
Yeah, bonus.
It's data and observability. Start thinking about data, where it lives, how it's accessed, the life cycle of data, and bring it all together. If you don't have the right context, and then you're building it on a fractured foundation, and then you're just automating chaos. Observability, you need to observe every element of it, especially as you have to go back and look at the reasons, right? So if you don't have your observability in place and you don't know what your agents are doing, you're just accumulating liability.
Yeah, thank you. Well said. Buffy?
You know, I think there is a great avenue for task-based engineering, but when you go into the agentic space, that's when you actually need to ask the tough question. How would I reinvent this? How would I actually do it differently? Because agentic allows you to reinvent the entire workflow from beginning to end. And you need to think that way, and you have to challenge your business, challenge the status quo to really come up with what is that net new process, net new workflow that you want to have.
Thank you, Buffy. David?
Wes, can I get three?
Go for it.
So just building on top of those two, once you understand the data and all those other elements, you need to start with a small task, start with a small workflow, whether it's ticket triaging, ticket escalation, compliance checks. Start small. What this gives you, it gives you and your staff and your teams and the different personas what is really needed and how do you learn and what skills are needed when you move into this agentic area. What security controls may fail, may not fail, what process, the whole stack. You sort of, again, fail fast. And you learn from that and you reiterate on that and you can actually get into production on some basic workflow.
Very insightful. Well, thank you, panel, for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wes.
Thank you, Wes.